Здравия желаю, товарищ моего канала, с вами майор Бен. И да, я не делал перевод 6.17, внимание, целый год. Я, конечно, извиняюсь, но теперь я буду переводы выпускать почаще. Естественно, все зависит от вас. Под первым выпуском вы набрали 16 лайков, и для первой части это достаточно достойно. Давайте так. 5 лайков, и я делаю новую часть. Не буду долго томить, приятного просмотра.
Good evening. An act of mercy or a crime against humanity? I'm joined now by...
Even when some of the questions got difficult, I made sure I knew what I was talking about.
What was your reaction when you first met a talking tank engine?
If you can't make an informed opinion, or if you can't string together 2 words on telly, well, maybe you shouldn't be on there.
There are 2 sides to this.
Admittedly, the subject matter was a bit bizarre sometimes.
There are some dark forces at work here.
You were alright as long as you could win over the audience.
See this, they're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
The Goetze family refused to answer any questions. Behind closed doors, the only question they agreed to answer had been asked repeatedly: would Thomas work on the railway? The response was an emphatic no. Thomas's DNA had been reprogrammed to accept and adapt to the engine structure, using the engine's internal system to maintain his organic functions. What no one could be sure of was how much of the engine was mechanical and how much was organic material. Thomas had been able to move around without coaches, but to work on the railway, his engine would need to be fired up and operated by a driver and fireman. Since no one could be sure how much of the engine was Thomas, the pressure caused by the engine could rupture his organs from the inside, and the incredible heat could boil him alive. Professor Hans and his father vowed Thomas would never work on the railways. Similarly, the 2 professors were to refuse many requests by people from around the world who wished to be biofused into engines.
There were billionaires offering to pay whatever they wanted to be converted into an engine or some other transport. Train enthusiasts too, and people with terminal illnesses were desperate to be made into trains. But for some reason, the Goetzes refused.
But there would be other interested parties, eager to seize on the biofusion goldmine. The independently wealthy Topham Hatt staged a hostile takeover, and within weeks had bought a controlling share in Sodor research. Immediately, the policy of the company changed, and so did the ethics. The medical supply wing was shut down, and work began on mass biofusion experiments and operations. Anyone who could afford it, some handing over their whole fortunes, were turned into engines. But, along with the new policy, there would be worse to come. Biofused engines would be allowed, then obliged, to work on the railways.
The first one we fired up was James. He didn't have the money some of these people had, and so agreed to basically sign his life away if they wanted to experiment further, or to take massive risks like this. As usual, the fat had everything recorded. All kept classified, you understand.
These recordings, shown for the first time, reveal the extent of Sir Topham Hatt's experiments.
It was horrible watching these engines work on the railways some days. But the tourists wanted to see it. They expected it. And for me, it was work.
But, with the new engine's increasing work schedule, came more and more accidents.
Edward was first to have problems. He'd been filming all day for the new TV series they'd announced, and for his last scene, he had to pull into Wellsworth Station and whistle to the kids on the platform.
Peep peep! Whistled Edward. Thank you very much.
Sadly, this was only the first in an increasing number of incidents. Harold had an obsession with aircraft and had paid to become a helicopter. The operation had gone well, but we had to ban him from being allowed to attempt flight. In an experiment kept secret until now, Mavis the diesel engine was to be the first biofused locomotive used on the railway.
We fueled her up and everything seemed fine. Then things got out of hand.
The diesel began to burn her internal organs. Everything organic in the engine was soon burning.
Have you ever heard a locomotive scream in pain? We tried rinsing out the fuel tank with water, but by then it was too late.
Mavis's body would be kept under lock and key indefinitely. In an unexpected U-turn, Sir Topham Hatt would ban fueled engines from being used on the island.
Harold was never told why he couldn't fly, but the decision would keep him alive, if only for a little while longer.
In fact, unknown to the outside world, there had been many failed biofusion experiments.
That fat bastard kept the accidents a secret, and legal disclaimers had to be signed by anyone being biofused, so there'd be no legal action taken if anything went wrong.
This footage shows engines being displayed to tourists during the off-season. Many of these engines were failed biofusion experiments and were too ill to work or were already dead.
They had to put a stop to that though.
With all accidents happening, everyone started asking the same thing. Why had Thomas, the first engine, worked so well?
Despite all the troubles the other engines had, Thomas had worked fine, seemingly oblivious to the other engines' problems and accidents.
Keeping their problems a secret from the outside world, Sodor Research began selling the technology to other countries in multi-million-pound deals. These countries would have less qualms about the use of fuel engines and even the modern electric trains. Even failed biofused engines were being displayed publicly in what would become a kind of freak show. To his horror, Professor Hans Goetze saw what this was leading to: slavery of engines, and immediately resigned. His father, Wilhelm, would go one step further.
Professor Wilhelm couldn't come to terms with what was happening to his engines, and took the only course he thought he could take.
That fat got a load of us rail staff over to his house to clean up after the body was taken away. You should have seen it. Sawdust everywhere. It took us days.
But such attempts to keep the incidents on Sodor a secret were short-lived, after a very public accident.
Gordon paid an enormous amount to be Sodor's first 462 configuration engine, much bigger than any other engine at the time. We were terrified that fat shite would make us fire up that huge engine.
We were shocked to discover he had insisted on being able to work on the railway. So, one night after the regular staff had finished for the day, fat some of the rail staff and I fired up the engine.
As usual, these experiments were filmed. This footage has never been broadcast before.
Dr. Ruth and I filmed it all.
It might be a bit shaky, it was handheld. At first, Gordon complained about the heat. Then that turned to pleas to douse the fire.
But that fat bastard held us back. He wanted to see what would happen.
He argued he had put a lot of work into Gordon, and the chances to get him working were too great an opportunity. He was literally cooking from the inside. By the time we were allowed to act, it was too late.
I wasn't as near to him as some of them. All I could do was run. I was lucky to get away with some singed clothes. Others weren't so lucky.
The fateful few hours following the accident would seal the fate of Sodor Research.
The fat stopped us trying to put out the fire, insisting that any evidence would fall back on us.
He kept repeating, "This was all your fault. You knew the dangers. You're legally to blame." He stopped us calling for ambulances or the fire brigade.
We told him, these are injured people here. They're going to die unless we do something. But he kept saying, no one from the outside can come in. No one can see this.